Guess who hasn't been invited to Munich? The Russians. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has been a long fixture at the Munich conference, but this year he won't be there. It's Europe's way of punishing Russia, or so they want the world to believe. They make a lot of noise about every such move, about how they've sanctioned Russia's energy sector because they do not want to bankroll Putin's war. They lectured India for buying Russian oil. They told the world how they have stopped importing oil and gas from Moscow. But here's something that Europe will not tell you. They've left a glaring loophole in their sanctions regime, and they've done it on purpose. We are talking about nuclear fuel. The world depends on Russia for nuclear energy, and Russia's nuclear trade is booming. It has seen a tremendous increase over the past year, the same year when Russia invaded Ukraine. I have some data with me. Russian nuclear fuel and technology sales rose more than 20% in 2022. What has Europe got to do with it? Everything. The EU's purchase of Russian nuclear fuel was at a 3-year high last year. A 3-year high because Europe is a big market for Russia. In 2021, Russia was the EU's third largest supplier of nuclear fuel. The EU paid more than $330 million to Russia for such fuel. European utilities that supply power to around 100 million people, I repeat 100 million people, rely on Russian nuclear giant Rosatom for supplies. Now, when I say nuclear fuel, I mean uranium. Almost all nuclear plants depend on uranium. And not just any uranium, it's an isotope called uranium-235. What's an isotope? Isotopes are distinct nuclear species of the same element. I don't want this to become a chemistry class, so I'll leave it at that. They're a type of uranium-235. But coming back to the topic, the West loves Russian uranium. It won't be able to survive without it. At least their nuclear power plants will not. As I said, Russia was the EU's third largest uranium supplier in 2021. It accounted for almost 20% of the EU's uranium imports. And in the last year, Russia's market share has increased, a jump of another 20%. Do you know who is the EU's second largest uranium supplier? Kazakhstan. And why is Kazakhstan important? Because uranium mining in Kazakhstan is also controlled by the Russians, by Russia's state-owned giant Rosatom, to be specific. So Russia actually controls nearly 43% of the EU's nuclear supplies. What about the United States? Ukraine's staunchest ally, the one that claims to have built a global coalition to support Ukraine. How much Russian uranium does America buy? About 15% of its uranium demand is fulfilled by Russia. And I'm still talking about natural uranium. There's another sphere where Russia is a global hegemon, and that is in providing nuclear enrichment services to various countries. The US bought almost 28% of such services from Russia in 2021. What about the European Union? It bought 26% of nuclear enrichment services from Russia in 2020. What do these numbers tell you? That the world depends on Russia for its nuclear needs a lot more than the world admits. Russia is also a global leader when it comes to nuclear power plant development. In the last decade, Russia started 19 nuclear power plant projects, 19. Do you know how many of these were started in other countries? 15. And that should give you some fuel for thought. Next question. Why do countries rely on Russia so much? Because it is a superior nuclear power. It offers a complete package: fuel, enrichment services, training a skilled workforce, disposing radioactive waste, and even running scholarship programs. Russia offers all of this and more. Russia's global nuclear footprint is expanding. 11 countries have operational Russian nuclear reactors. Many more are under construction. Russia has signed deals with at least 30 countries around the world. It gives big loans to build nuclear power plants. And these loans cover almost 80% of the construction cost. I have some examples. Russia has given $35 billion to Egypt in nuclear loans, $11 billion to Bangladesh, and $10 billion to Hungary. It's a long list, and Ukraine knows this. Its president has been pushing for sanctions on Russia's nuclear sector.
The time has come, in particular, for sanctions against the Russian nuclear industry, against all its branches, organizations, and all entities that work for the Russian missile program, as well as for new steps in the energy sector, including an embargo on Russian energy carriers. Europe has enough power to leave a terrorist state without such a powerful resource for its aggression.
такого потужного ресурсу.
Zelensky has been saying this for quite some time now, but the West hasn't lifted a finger. Why? Because it doesn't suit them. Russia is critical for their nuclear needs. Some European countries depend entirely on Russian nuclear fuel. In fact, I have a quote from Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban from the month of January. This is what he said: "We will not allow the plan to include nuclear energy into the sanctions to be implemented. This is out of the question." And remember, the EU cannot impose sanctions until all of its members are on board. Hungary is a member. So this is a non-starter. Also, another example of the West's hypocrisy. Them buying Russian nuclear fuel is okay, but India buying Russian oil is problematic. We are back to discussing balloons. The world can't seem to get enough of them. They're the flavor of the season, the weapon of choice, the most formidable spies popping up in the skies across the world. The Americans said they shot down Chinese balloons. The Chinese said they spotted American balloons. Could the Russians have been far behind? They've joined the balloon wars, it seems. Ukraine says it saw 6 Russian balloons and it shot them down. This is like Alice in Wonderland, curiouser and curiouser. The first balloon appeared in Montana in the US, then Latin American states. Soon Japan floated into the headlines. It said it spotted Chinese balloons in 2019. Taiwan gave a balloon warning. In India, there was a sighting over Port Blair. It's almost like a new club now. Everybody who's anybody has a balloon story. And the world has a new challenge to deal with. How do you ensure the safety of your skies? How much of a threat do these balloons pose? Where are they coming from? And the Russians? Can their balloons deliver what their tanks and jets haven't? Tonight, we'll bring you the most comprehensive report on spy balloons. It's taking a lot to say this with a straight face. Comprehensive report on spy balloons. We'll take you inside the Chinese facility that makes these balloons. We're starting with Ukraine because that's where the latest action is. The balloons were spotted in Kiev. They also flew over Romania and Moldova. In response, Moldova shut down its airspace and Romania scrambled jets. How did the balloons end up there? Ukraine says they were Russian, but these balloons were not there to spy. They had a different purpose. They were there to distract. Kiev says the intention was to trick Ukraine's air defenses and exhaust valuable supplies.
The enemy wants us to use our force and means, our air defense missiles, against those balloons and their reflectors. They are the essential element of our air defense system. They defend our critical infrastructure and other crucial objects. Our soldiers that are on combat duty monitor the situation 24 hours a day, not only in Ukraine's airspace, but also far beyond.
So what kind of balloons are these? They have radar reflectors, something that would set off the air defense systems of Ukraine. So when the system detects a balloon like this, it will open fire. Ukraine says it has detected these objects twice. It's calling them fake targets. How did these balloons end up in Moldova and Romania? Reports say they drifted into their airspace. In response, Moldova shut its airbase for 1 hour and Romania sent 2 fighter jets. They were not able to find the balloons, so the jets returned after 30 minutes of aerial search. What does Russia have to say about this? No statement from Moscow yet, but the West is issuing warnings. The NATO is stepping up vigilance. The NATO chief says he sees a pattern here.
Then on the balloons, well, I think what we saw over the United States, I visited the United States last week, is part of a pattern where China, but also Russia, are increasing their intelligence and surveillance activities against NATO allies with many different platforms. We see it in cyber, we see it with satellites, more and more satellites, and we see it then with balloons. That highlights the importance of our vigilance, our increased presence, and also that we ramp up and step up how we share intelligence and how we monitor and protect our airspace.
Stoltenberg mentioned China and the spy balloons. Let's show you where they come from. Look at these satellite pictures. They are from Hainan, the island of Hainan in China. The PLA has a base here, a facility that is dedicated to the spy balloon program. This is what it looks like. Now take a closer look. A report has described the facility in great detail. It is surrounded by a security fence. There is a 140-meter launch pad. Some equipment is also visible. It appears like something that can be used to launch balloons. There is a hangar near the launch pad. Clearly, this is a large-scale program, but Beijing continues to deny its existence. It is now issuing threats to the US. China says it will retaliate.
China has repeatedly explained the situation to the US, but the US has abused force and overreacted to escalate the situation, and used this as a pretext to illegally sanction Chinese enterprises and institutions to which China resolutely opposes and will take countermeasures against the relevant US entities that harm China's sovereignty and security, and resolutely safeguard national sovereignty and legitimate rights and interests.
The balloon wars are intensifying. First, America shot down the Chinese balloon. Then it sanctioned 6 Chinese entities. Washington said they support China's spy balloon program. Now, Beijing is threatening retaliation. It says it spotted as many as 10 American balloons and that these balloons flew over Tibet and Xinjiang. This is also a narrative war, and China is desperate to win it. This week, China declared America as the empire of mass surveillance.
When it comes to surveillance and monitoring of other countries, we have to point out that the US is the empire of mass surveillance. I believe that the international community, especially Europe, has first-hand experience.
Well, they may have a point, but 2 wrongs do not make a right. China must explain its actions. American lawmakers, meanwhile, are pushing for a firm response. 2 resolutions have been passed in the US Senate. They condemn China for the balloon incident. One of the resolutions declares that China invaded the US airspace.
We ought to be much more forceful than we have been with the Chinese government. We ought to be saying to them that this is espionage on our soil, this is a deliberate act by them.
Expect a war of words to follow. Germany is hosting a security conference this week in Munich. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken will attend. So will China's State Councillor Wang Yi. Will they come face to face in Munich? Will they have a meeting? There's no official confirmation yet, but a showdown cannot be ruled out. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Today is about the way of the water. Water covers 71% of the Earth's surface. 17% of the biological species on Earth are underwater. A magnificent world lives in the depth of blue oceans. We bring you pictures clicked by the winners of the Underwater Photographer Contest. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.
So, where are you investing?
Oh, China, it's just growing.
It's always been the manufacturing hub. Besides, India's struggling post-COVID.
Of course.
Sir, actually India's management of COVID has been much better. China's situation till date is unclear. After zero COVID lockdowns, China is gradually losing its supremacy as manufacturing leader. The country's share of global exports of footwear, furniture, or clothing accessories has fallen since 2016. Meanwhile, India has bounced back. So by the looks of it,
India could become the global manufacturing hub by 2030. Presenting Vantage with me, Palki Sharma, a first of its kind global show with an Indian perspective.